In the world of elite thoroughbred racing, a horse is not just an animal. It is a multi-million-dollar biological machine. You can spend 10,000 hours training a horse, but if the genetics aren't flawless, you will never win the Derby. The real money in this industry isn't made in the winner's circle, it's made in the breeding shed. A single microscopic vial of frozen genetic material from a champion stallion can sell for $50,000. In this business, bloodlines are everything. You protect them with your life. I spent 20 years cultivating the perfect bloodline. I just never realized that the most toxic, treacherous element in my stable wasn't a bad gene, it was my own wife. My name is Liam. I'm 42 years old, and I am a master equine geneticist and the owner of a boutique thoroughbred breeding farm in Kentucky. 6 years ago, I married Victoria. Victoria was a luxury equestrian marketer. She loved the glamour of the racing world, the massive hats, the mint juleps, the billionaire owners in the VIP boxes. I was the guy in the mud, delivering foals at 3 a.m. But we made a great team. I handled the science, and she handled the sales. 4 years ago, my life's work culminated in a stallion named Midnight Sovereign. He was a freak of nature. He went undefeated in his racing career, winning the Triple Crown. When he retired to my farm to become a sire, his value skyrocketed. Breeders from all over the world were wiring me millions of dollars just for the chance to artificially inseminate their mares with Sovereign's genetics. He was a gold mine. I told Victoria that Sovereign was our legacy. We were going to build an empire that would last generations. But Victoria didn't want to wait for generations. She looked at the cryogenic tanks in my laboratory, and she realized that the fastest way to get rich wasn't to sell the gold. It was to steal the vault.
The rot in our marriage started when Victoria began networking with a man named Harrison. Harrison was a 50-year-old hedge fund billionaire who had recently bought a massive 1,000-acre mega farm right across the county line. Harrison didn't know the first thing about horses. He was a Wall Street shark who bought his way into the sport to show off to his rich friends. He had the best facilities, the most expensive mares, but he lacked the one thing money couldn't immediately buy: a champion sire. He desperately wanted Midnight Sovereign's genetics to legitimize his farm. Suddenly, Victoria was spending all her time at Harrison's mega farm, claiming she was consulting on their marketing strategy. The red flags didn't just quietly appear, they flared up like a barn fire. First, the profound, unapologetic disrespect. Victoria started actively belittling my boutique operation. "Liam, you need to think bigger," she scoffed one evening, tossing her designer bag onto the kitchen island. "Harrison operates a $100 million facility. He flies clients in on helicopters. You're still mucking out your own stalls. You lack corporate vision. Nobody cares about your hands-on approach. They care about scale." Second, the intense, unnatural secrecy regarding her devices. Victoria changed the passcode on her phone and her laptop. She started taking crisis PR calls in her car, sitting in the driveway with the engine running for 40 minutes before coming inside. Third, and by far the most terrifying, was her sudden, highly specific interest in my cryogenic laboratory. Victoria, a woman who absolutely loathed the clinical side of the business, suddenly asked me how the liquid nitrogen tanks worked and exactly which inventory logs tracked Sovereign's frozen semen straws. When a marketing director suddenly cares about the physical inventory of microscopic biological assets, you don't answer the question, you run a deep-level security audit. When you have a cryogenic tank containing biological material worth upwards of $10 million, you don't just leave a padlock on the door. My laboratory requires a biometric thumbprint, and every time the heavy lid of the nitrogen tank is opened, a digital timestamp is logged on my secure server.
One Saturday night, while Victoria was supposedly at a weekend equestrian summit in New York, I was in my office reviewing breeding charts. I pulled up the laboratory logs to check the nitrogen levels. I noticed an anomaly. The primary tank holding Midnight Sovereign's genetics had been opened at 2 a.m. 2 days prior. I was asleep in bed at that time. I didn't panic. I opened the security camera feed for the lab. The footage had been wiped for that exact 10-minute window. I immediately went upstairs to Victoria's home office. She was sloppy. She had left her backup iPad plugged into the wall, and the iCloud sync was active. I bypassed the lock screen and opened her encrypted messaging app. She was in a private chat with Harrison. I didn't just find an affair. I found a premeditated, multi-million-dollar act of corporate espionage and grand larceny. Harrison wrote, "My head veterinarian is ready. We have 20 of our most expensive broodmares prepped for artificial insemination. If we use Sovereign's genetics, the foals will be born next spring, and my farm will completely dominate the racing world. Did you get the straws out of the tank?" Victoria replied, her words dripping with a casual, horrifying cruelty that made the blood freeze in my veins. I bypassed the camera and pulled 20 straws of Sovereign's best material last night while the idiot was sleeping. Tomorrow, I'll hand the thermal flask to your transport guy. Once your foals hit the ground and your farm takes over, Liam's little boutique operation will be worthless. I'll serve him with divorce papers right after the breeding season. He's just a dirt-kicking farmer, Harrison. I can't wait to stand in the winner's circle with you. Harrison responded, "You're a genius, baby. The farmer is gonna build my dynasty." I sat alone in the dark, silent office, staring at the glowing iPad screen as my entire reality shattered. My wife of 6 years was sleeping with a corporate parasite. Together, they were actively plotting to steal my life's work, hijack my exclusive bloodline, produce 20 illegal champion foals, and leave my farm utterly destroyed. They thought I was just a naive, dirt-kicking farmer. They didn't understand the level of absolute, unmitigated biological destruction a master equine geneticist is capable of executing. If you want to destroy a rival breeding operation, you don't burn down their barn. You let them steal your seeds. You let them plant them in their most expensive soil. You let them wait a full year for the harvest, and then you let the entire world see what grows. I didn't confront her. If I did, Harrison's army of corporate lawyers would bury me in injunctions, claim I gave them the material willingly, and tie me up in court for a decade until I went bankrupt. I needed them to steal the genetics. I needed Harrison to proudly inseminate his multi-million-dollar mares. So I went to work in the laboratory. I took the real, genuine cryogenic straws containing Midnight Sovereign's flawless champion DNA, and I moved them to a highly secure, private storage facility across the state. Then, I went to a local petting zoo that was going out of business. I bought the biological material of a 15-year-old, grossly overweight, incredibly stubborn miniature Shetland pony named Barnaby. Barnaby was 3 feet tall, had a severe underbite, and a coat that looked like a dirty rug. I brought Barnaby's genetics back to my lab. I meticulously repackaged the pony semen into the exact same proprietary color-coded cryogenic straws that I used for Midnight Sovereign. I printed identical barcode labels and sealed them perfectly. To Harrison's high-paid veterinarians, looking at the straws under a microscope, the material would look absolutely flawless. It was viable, healthy equine DNA. When they inseminated their elite million-dollar racing mares, the pregnancies would take perfectly. But I knew exactly what was growing inside those mares. It wasn't a dynasty of racing champions. It was a herd of short, fat, stubborn, miniature Shetland ponies. I placed the rigged straws right back into the main nitrogen tank. The next day, Victoria kissed me on the cheek. "I'm going to run some errands in the city, baby," she lied smoothly. "Take your time," I said, smiling at her. "I've got everything handled in the lab." I let her steal the thermal flask. I let her hand it to the devil. When Victoria handed me the divorce papers a month later, she tried to look sympathetic. "I'm sorry, Liam," she lied smoothly, wearing her expensive designer coat. "I just need a man who lives in the corporate world, not the mud. You need to let me go." "I understand, Victoria," I said calmly, signing the papers without hesitation. "Good luck in the corporate world." The moment she moved out, I unleashed hell behind the scenes. I took my original time-stamped laboratory logs, the security footage, and the WhatsApp transcripts, and I went to the most aggressive equine attorney in Kentucky. I didn't sue Harrison. I didn't say a word. Instead, we submitted a highly classified, sealed dossier to the Jockey Club and the National Thoroughbred Registry. We provided irrefutable proof that Harrison's megafarm had engaged in the illegal theft and unauthorized use of patented biological material. My lawyer smiled like a shark. "Liam," he said, "when Harrison tries to register those 20 foals next spring, claiming they are the offspring of your champion, the Jockey Club will demand DNA verification. If the DNA doesn't match, it is a massive federal-level fraud in the racing industry. He will be banned for life." "Oh, the DNA definitely won't match," I laughed. "But we don't need to wait for a blood test. Just wait until they hit the ground." Harrison and Victoria were busy building a massive, glittering glass castle. They were inviting investors to view the pregnant mares, hyping up the future of their racing dynasty. And I was holding the only detonator. It was finally spring. 11 months had passed. Foaling season had arrived at Harrison's mega farm. Harrison was so arrogant that he had turned the birth of the first foal into a massive PR event. He invited 20 elite investors, racing journalists, and breeders to his pristine, climate-controlled foaling barn. He wanted the world to see the first son of his new stolen dynasty. Victoria was standing right next to him, beaming with pride, waiting for her empire to be secured. I sat in the sweltering cab of my truck on a ridge overlooking his property, watching the live updates from the racing blogs on my iPad. Harrison stood up in the viewing gallery, tapping a spoon against his crystal champagne flute. The room went quiet. "Ladies and gentlemen," Harrison announced, his voice oozing with arrogance, "tonight we welcome the future of thoroughbred racing, the bloodline that will dominate the Derby for the next decade." Down in the massive foaling stall, his elite $2 million mare was in labor. The head veterinarian was assisting. The crowd watched in breathless anticipation as the foal was finally delivered onto the clean straw. But as the veterinarian wiped the fluid from the newborn animal, the room went completely dead silent. It wasn't a sleek, long-legged, powerful thoroughbred racing foal. It was a tiny, incredibly stocky, fuzzy little creature with disproportionately short, stubby legs, a massive, blocky head, and a severe underbite. It looked like a hairy, deformed potato. It was a miniature Shetland pony. The veterinarian stared at the tiny creature in absolute, unadulterated horror. He looked up at Harrison in the VIP gallery. "Sir, this is a pony." The elite investors gasped. A racing journalist in the front row actually burst out laughing. "What is that thing?" a furious billionaire investor screamed, dropping his champagne glass. "Are we being mocked?" Harrison's face turned the color of wet concrete. He looked at the tiny, fuzzy pony stumbling around the stall, and then he looked at Victoria. Victoria looked like she was going to throw up, staring at the disaster in pure, unadulterated panic. Over the next 48 hours, the nightmare compounded. One by one, all 20 of Harrison's elite, multi-million-dollar racing mares gave birth to 20 tiny, fuzzy, incredibly stubborn miniature ponies. I took a slow, deep sip of my cold coffee, smiled at the sheer destruction unfolding on the blogs, and put my truck in drive. You cannot recover from breeding 20 miniature ponies out of million-dollar racing mares in front of the entire thoroughbred industry. The fallout was an absolute apocalyptic corporate massacre. The photos of the champion ponies went viral globally within hours. Harrison became the biggest laughingstock in the history of the sport. Because he had solicited millions of dollars in investment money based on stolen, fraudulent genetic claims, his investors pulled their funding immediately and sued him for gross negligence and fraud. But the fatal blow came from the Jockey Club. Because my lawyer had already submitted the dossier proving Harrison had orchestrated the theft of biological material, the governing body brought the hammer down. Harrison's entire mega farm was stripped of its licensing. He was permanently banned from the thoroughbred racing industry. His $100 million facility was rendered completely worthless overnight. Victoria's life was vaporized. Harrison, realizing he was facing massive federal lawsuits and total bankruptcy, immediately blamed her. He told investigators that she was a rogue marketing director who had supplied him with the fraudulent genetics without his knowledge. He threw her to the wolves to save himself. She called me from a cheap motel room in the city, sobbing so hard she was hyperventilating. Liam, please, the investors are suing me. Harrison dumped me. The foals are ponies. You have to tell them you made a mistake with the tanks. Please, I have nothing. I didn't make a mistake, Victoria, I said calmly, leaning back against the stall door of Midnight Sovereign. I gave you exactly what you stole. You just forgot to do your own DNA testing. I read your messages, by the way. I hope you enjoy the winner's circle with Barnaby. I hung up and blocked her number. During our divorce settlement, she had absolutely zero leverage. Because she was facing criminal charges for corporate espionage and grand larceny against me, the judge awarded me 100% of the marital assets and denied her any alimony. She walked away with massive legal debt and a permanently ruined reputation in the equestrian world. It's been almost 3 years since that foaling season. A month after the dust settled, I legally sold exclusive breeding rights to Midnight Sovereign to a massive, highly respected international syndicate for $15 million. I kept full ownership of my farm, hired a team of incredibly talented, hard-working geneticists, and my boutique operation is now recognized as the absolute gold standard in the industry. Last I heard, Victoria avoided prison by taking a plea deal, but she lost her marketing license permanently due to the fraud charges. She is currently working as a ticket taker at a low-end carnival, watching children ride carousel horses, light years away from the billionaire VIP boxes she tried to steal. Harrison is completely bankrupt, buried in endless litigation, and forced to sell his megafarm at a massive loss. If there is a lesson to be learned here, it's this: never try to hijack a bloodline if you don't know the geneticist who controls the vault. If your partner thinks they can use you as a stepping stone, steal your legacy, and leave you to rot in the mud while they take the millions, don't panic. Don't fight them for the keys to the lab. Smile. Leave the tank unlocked, let them steal the seeds, and let them confidently plant them in their most expensive soil. And right when they think they've struck gold, sit back and watch the harvest blow their entire world apart. Thanks for listening to my story. If you enjoyed this one, drop a like, hit subscribe, and let me know in the comments, what's the most satisfying catastrophic failure you've ever witnessed? Stay sharp, trust the science, And always check the DNA.